All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We have two really awesome panelists today, and we cannot wait to get this show on the road and ask them a couple of questions. But first, my name is Andrew Whipp, and I'm the lead creative and editor at Greenbuzz Agency. And I'm also joined by my good friend, colleague, Todd Plotkin. He is the CEO and founder of Greenbuzz Agency. How are you doing today, Todd?
I'm doing well. You know, the Celtics took a big loss last night, double overtime, so it went late. But now I'm excited for tomorrow, Game 7. I'm excited for the NFL coming back tonight. So a lot of good sports going on.
Yep. I'll be looking forward to that one as well. As a quick aside, if any of our audience members ended up here and don't know who we are or what we do, Greenbuzz Agency is a full-service video production company, and we are based out of Old Town, Alexandria. We specialize in documentary and motion graphics and branded content. So if you or your teams are curious about the process of making a video or looking to tell your own story, please don't hesitate to reach out. Bringing it back around, today's webinar is the 13th in our Greenbuzz Agency webinar series, which was created to connect our community with thought leaders who can help us break down top-line strategy, best practices, and advice during the pandemic. And if you'd like to check out any of our previous episodes, feel free to visit greenbuzzagency.com/blogs. And there you'll be able to get some on-demand recordings of all the episodes we've done thus far, which include strategies and ideas from executives at Twitter, Quibi, PBS, Sotheby's, Make-A-Wish, NASCAR, and many, many more. Today, we're going to be focusing on how to create content that drives change and inclusion. So if you're looking to build community and drive change, then you are absolutely in the right place. Moving on to our introductions here. Today, we're joined by Sydnye White and Amy Levner. Sydnye is passionate about ideas, words, sounds, and images to create stories that open minds and touch hearts. As a national Emmy-nominated documentary and factual television producer, she has spearheaded, created, and overseen thousands of hours of programming distributed on networks like Discovery, TLC, Animal Planet, Nat Geo, BET, TV One, PBS stations, and I'm sure the list keeps going on. As a content creator for nonprofits and corporations, she's informed and entertained audiences while boosting viewer clicks and engagement on websites and social media. She's a non-published novelist with a finished manuscript sitting at the top of her closet and is currently working on a second novel that she hopes to have published one day. We're also joined by Amy, who is the VP of Communications and Marketing at KaBOOM, a national nonprofit working to end place-based inequity. At KaBOOM, Amy leads communications, marketing, digital strategy, and research efforts. Before joining KaBOOM, Amy led AARP's Livable Communities agenda, an effort dedicated to creating livable communities for people over 50, as well as their families. So throughout her career, Amy's been a leader in social change marketing, running successful campaigns in both the agency and nonprofit setting. So thank you both so much for swinging by. Thank you for sharing your time and your insights with us. I'm super excited with this. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's just jump right in. Sydnye, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really would like to thank the folks at Greenbuzz for having me. I'm really honored to be on the panel with Amy today. You guys might have to keep me honest because at Special Olympics, we have so many great stories and such great content that I can sometimes get carried away talking about it. We're known for sports, so it's kind of appropriate that Andrew started and Todd started this conversation talking about basketball. But our mission is to provide year-round sports training and athletic competition in a variety of Olympic-type sports for children and adults with intellectual disabilities, giving them continuing opportunities to develop physical fitness, demonstrate courage, experience joy, and participate in sharing gifts, skills, and friendship with their families and other Special Olympics athletes and community. We are an organization that represents athletes with intellectual disabilities. That's cognitive disabilities, not physical disabilities. We're sometimes confused with Paralympics, which is physical disabilities. Though if you have a Special Olympics, if you are an athlete with an intellectual and physical disability, you're certainly welcome at Special Olympics. We also have unified partners. Unified is a term we use to explain athletes and coworkers who do not have intellectual disabilities, but compete with people who do. So we might have a basketball team where 60% of the people have an intellectual disability and 40% of the people do not. But they get a chance to learn, play, and compete together. Our athletes are of the ages 8 to 80. I know we're thought of as children, an organization with a lot of children in it, but actually the majority of our adults are teens and older. Although we do have young athletes program for competitors under the age of 8. And part of my job and the content team's job is to represent the athlete from their own perspective. So we are for athletes by athletes. And as much as possible, we try to tell stories that put the athletes in the middle of the story or give them the tools to tell their own story so that they can show the power of sport, performance, contribution, and inclusion. We're a global organization with a global reach. We have 7 regions around the globe. We're split into 7 regions. In those regions, those are further broken up into 192 countries with programs, and we have another 8 or so pilot programs in additional countries. We represent almost 7 million athletes and unified partners. And we also have thousands of volunteers, families, staff, and corporate partners that help spread and support our mission. So you can imagine, as a content team at headquarters, we are a unified team of 3, although we have a few more people in the greater communications team. But we are responsible for storytelling and creating content globally. We wouldn't create content just for use in the United States, let's say, or Russia, for example, but we would create content that could be used by different countries, different continents, different regions. We have, as most people have, various groups of people that we're trying to reach, whether they're internal to Special Olympics or external, where we're trying to reach new people to bring them into the movement and get them excited about what we do. We like to say that at Special Olympics, we are all about sports and more. And we say and more because there's a lot of things that go into being a good athlete that you need in order to compete at your best. So for example, we have a health component, which gives athletes tools and information that they need to stay healthy and to compete at their best. We are the largest healthcare provider for people with intellectual disabilities in the world. And that is because there's a lot of inequities when it comes to people with intellectual disabilities receiving quality healthcare. Doctors, health professionals around the world just haven't taken the time yet, or even realized that they need to take the time to learn how to communicate to athletes and people with intellectual disabilities, how to understand them, make them comfortable in healthcare settings so that they can advocate for their own health. So at our competitions, we have health screenings, and health professionals can give screenings for anything from fitting people for the right size shoes to making sure they have eyeglasses that they can use, that they can see. And we've had a lot of success with finding health issues. Our trained professionals can refer the athletes to healthcare providers in their communities where they can get follow-up care. So we've had, for example, an athlete who had oral cancer that was spotted. He was sent to seek further help, and the situation was taken care of pretty quickly. And he's not only doing well in competing, but he's also become a host sometimes on ESPN to call Special Olympics events. And if you've ever seen, or if you get a chance to see our videos where athletes are fitted for the first time with hearing aids, and the emotion that they and their coaches experience when the athlete hears for the first time, it is really incredible. It can be a little confusing for the athlete. If you can imagine, you haven't heard anything the majority of your life, and now you got to go on a basketball court and you're hearing the ball bouncing and people yelling and fans cheering, and you got to figure out what you're really supposed to be listening to. But it's still a testament to our health component. We also have a leadership component. which gives our athletes opportunity to use the skills that they get from competition and training, the teamwork, the leadership, the critical thinking skills in jobs, in public speaking, in community work. And we have an educational component where there's Special Olympics programming embedded in schools, where students with intellectual disabilities have some classes, they have unified PE, they have sports teams together, activities together. And we have found that these programs worldwide bring down instances of bullying, and they pump up acceptance of all different types. And the students really at a young age get to practice and spread the idea of inclusion. We call it the inclusion revolution. Again, it's very exciting to share these stories, to create content that shares these stories. But at the end of the day, we represent the athletes, and we need to make sure that the athletes are getting the information through the content that they need to be healthy, strong, and engaged. And as I just spoke about, there's so many activities that athletes can take part of, and many of them do. But in the age of the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of that one-on-one engagement is gone. It's just gone away. And as many of us have experienced with the pandemic, a sense of isolation, being lonely, missing that social interaction, you can imagine how the athletes feel. For us, this is our new normal. For them, for many of them, it's their normal. They have experienced this prior, and Special Olympics has been a space where they can feel good about themselves, where they can gain confidence, where they can get that social interaction. But again, it's very difficult in these times to do that while you're sitting at home. So as an organization, we had to look at how could we support our athletes and turn some of the time and resources that we were using to talk to external audiences with our content, turn that towards our athletes and supporting them. So we said, okay, how can we use technology as a bridge? That's really the only way that we can reach our athletes around the world. And we have developed a lot of resources, content, information that's disseminated and distributed in a lot of different ways. But I'm just going to talk about 3 examples today. So one of the things that we looked at first was how to keep our athletes safe during the coronavirus pandemic. And we turned to the athletes. Our athletes, as I mentioned before, have a lot of leadership skills, and they have a lot of information that they can share with each other. Right now, you're seeing a video of proper hand washing techniques. This is being demonstrated by Nyasha Durera, who's from Zimbabwe. He and our health team created the content, and then we worked with him to turn it into a video. And it was very important at the time in Africa, where there's not always access to clean water. But it's become even more important for our athletes to learn these tools and techniques during coronavirus, no matter where they are, whether or not they're in Africa or Alabama. And one of the great things that this demonstrates is our athlete-led content. We have lots of content from our athletes on a variety of subjects, such as how to conduct a podcast interview, how to make a friendship bracelet, how to color pictures using Illustrator. These are all skills that our athletes use and demonstrate in their everyday lives, that they decided, hey, this might be good information for other people out there who might want to do the same thing. So we've given them a chance to devise their own videos sharing this information. And then we take the content, when we share it on our website, we're able to collate it with tag words such as expert tip videos or fun activities. So if you were to go to this hand washing video and then click on one of these keywords, expert tip videos, then all of our expert tip videos from our athletes would appear. And it's kind of a win-win-win situation. Our athletes feel good about their contributions. Our audiences can learn something new, but they also can learn that people with intellectual disabilities have a lot to share, and audiences can start seeing them as people to turn to get information, helpful information. after we take care of the basics of keeping the athletes safe, we turn to what are some of the types of content that we can offer to keep the athletes healthy and fit. After all, they are, for the most part, looking forward to competitions, and if not, at least training. But sitting around the house is not a good way to prepare for training. So we looked at fitness videos, and we have a lot of different types on the website on the specialolympics.org. One of the most popular ones is our School of Strength workout video series with the WWE, which is one of our great corporate partners that really helps share content far and wide with the wrestlers. These videos, there's a series of 4 of them, are presented by WWE wrestling champion Becky Lynch and Special Olympics athletes, about 6 of them. And they take you through warm-up, flexibility, strength, and endurance exercises. They can demonstrate, for example, there might be arm circles that warm up the arms, strengthen the arms, but also mimic the motion for butterfly stroke in swimming. So the athletes can keep engaging their muscles and keep that muscle memory going so that when it's time to get in the pool again, they are ready to play, as we say, return to play. They're ready for that stage. The videos are also great because anybody can use it. The athletes and their families have been using it together. You can do it at a comfortable level that fits you and wherever you are in your fitness routine, but really anybody can use it. My kids who are in middle school and high school also sometimes just turn one of these on and kind of get warmed up before they do their fitness videos as well. The good thing about this particular series is it comes with a fitness tracker and nutrition suggestions so that coaches and families have all the content that they need to make this a 360 health and fitness experience. We've been really excited about the translations so far. Spanish, Russian, Korean are just a few of the translations of this video, but we're also really excited about our Special Olympics China program, who has reproduced these videos using Chinese athletes, Chinese ambassadors and celebrities and influencers, and there's a WWE wrestler from Scotland as well who helps present these for folks who can understand. I believe it's in Mandarin. My third example of how we're using content to reach our internal audiences of our athletes is the International Day of Dance. If you've ever been to a Special Olympics event, the one thing you will know and notice about our athletes, other than the fact that they're great competitors, is that they love to dance, no matter where in the world they're from. And of course, dancing is a universal activity. So we decided to take advantage of International Dance Day. We had athletes from all around the world, from all 7 regions, send us some dance videos. We then, prior to International Day, were able to share that content on our social media platforms. As individual videos, we also edited together a compilation, and we invited everyone around the world to engage with us during International Dance Day, to dance for inclusion. And all that was to have people record themselves dancing, post it on whichever social media platform they wanted to, and tag Special Olympics. And not only was it really, it was really successful, we were able to get athletes around the world posting. I think I got very little work done that day because I was just looking at all the great content that our athletes were posting. But it also gave an opportunity for our supporting brands, our partners, to activate around as well. And so they created and posted content, maybe 20 or 30 of our partners, I think, did so, at least in the US. And they included Major League Soccer, Coca-Cola, WWE, of course, World Tennis Association, so many more, where they had their staff, their celebrities, their influencers record themselves dancing, post it, and tag us. So it was really fun. It was really engaging. On Twitter, we got almost 29 million impressions. Facebook engagement increased by over 3%. And on Instagram, Caroline Shriver, who is a dancer, got 22,000 views alone. So again, it was really successful, but it gave our athletes something to feel connected to, uplifted. And when they saw all of the responses, they could also feel good about it, and it kept them moving. I did want to point out that sometimes connectivity with technology, it can be difficult. For example, our Special Olympics Africa program found that 80 to 90% of the athletes in Africa don't have access to good Wi-Fi, or they don't have the tools, the computers, the phones to access that Wi-Fi. So despite all of this great content that's online or can be distributed digitally, they are not able to access it. We found that our East Asia, Asia Pacific regions also had some of the same issues. Our Latin America, Middle East, and North Africa regions had some of the same issues. So it was really great when our team from Special Olympics Africa said, let's take some of the content that we have digitally, that we have online, and figure out a way to distribute that. So with this slide in the middle, you see an example of an exercise card from our Fit 5 program. And our Fit 5 program encourages athletes to work out 5 days a week, eat 5 fruits and vegetables a day, and to drink 5 bottles of water a day. But they also have, like I said, demonstrations of how to do certain stretches, warm up, and strength and endurance exercises. So the Africa team took these pages from the website and printed them out in card form, had them laminated, and put them on hooks so that you can wear them as a lanyard. Coaches can connect them to their belts, and they become mobile. So athletes, coaches, parents can take this content wherever they are. They can work out individually or as a group, of course, using social distancing, and continue to stay fit and healthy. This content sharing was so successful in Kenya that they've gotten additional corporate funding, and the government is now looking at using these Special Olympics Fit 5 cards to distribute through schools throughout Kenya, whether or not they have any affiliation with Special Olympics, so that students throughout the country can continue to stay active while they're learning at home virtually. So now, with this last slide, I'd just like to highlight a couple of pieces of success that we've had in sharing this content through technology. We have a recent survey that we've done with Special Olympics athletes. This is really new information, hot off the presses. You guys are among the first to see and hear about it. But 75% of athletes surveyed have used the Special Olympics resources during the pandemic. Some of the most common pieces of content that they use are the at-home exercises, the COVID prevention tips, and virtual games. So with virtual games, we gave opportunities for athletes to do sports, like, either send in videos, or there were some live virtual events that they could participate in that way. The survey also found that athletes who use these resources and content were more likely to practice all 3 COVID prevention methods, such as social distancing, hand washing, and wearing masks. And on the flip side of that, the athletes who practiced all 3 prevention methods, 92% of them utilized the Special Olympics resources and content. So that's been really very exciting to know that we can use our content and our content platforms not just to spread our message far and wide, but also to support the people that we were founded to support during this very strange and unusual time. And so I'd like to thank everyone again for joining and for listening to my presentation. I look forward to the question and answer portion after Amy's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sydney. That was really great, and I can see why the alchemy that the Green Buzz team has put together in choosing to have Sydney and me tell our stories and the stories of our brands and the pivots and the work that we've had to do to adapt to these times. And so I'll try to connect some dots for you all too, but I'd also love to have a conversation about that, excuse me, when we get to the Q&A. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about KaBOOM and how we have recently launched new brand and our brand evolution this year, and what that has been like in light of COVID, and also in light of the increased and wonderful focus on racial equity that has happened in this country. And so I'll walk you through some of that. But before I get into that, let me provide some context. One of the key pieces is that, KaBOOM, we're known for building play spaces, working alongside communities to build play spaces in communities that don't have them. The really interesting thing, though, is our cause is a racial equity cause, and the right to belong and to access and be a part of public space has been a part of the civil rights movement for years. You can think back to and trace our historical context back to the fight for desegregating swimming pools and parks. Even in our backyard here in DC, Glen Oak Park was a segregated park for a long time, getting federal funding, and several Howard students fought for the right to simply ride the carousel and spend a lovely day and afternoon there. So we are a part of a long history of ensuring that everybody, no matter what color your skin is or where you come from or who you are, has the right to be in public space together. Let me talk a little bit about where KaBOOM fits into that context. So you can see this timeline of our journey, and we were founded because two little kids, brother and sister, Aisha and Clendon, died when they crawled into a hot car on a summer day, the day in July, in the summer heat of DC, and were just looking for a place to play. There was a Washington Post reporter that went out and did some research. You can imagine there was a lot of finger pointing at parents and other, folks around in that neighborhood where Aisha and Clendon grew up. They grew up in the Congress Heights neighborhood in Southeast DC. But a Washington Post reporter went out and found that there wasn't a playground within a 3-mile radius of where these two kids lived. And so, what role does the fact that communities that have been grossly overlooked, grossly disinvested in, what message does that send? What role does that play? Of course, the kids had to go into a car because there was no place for them to go. And so over the years, KaBOOM was born out of creating a space for kids in that neighborhood to play. And we did that and have been doing that, and we'll keep doing that for as long as we can. But we were really implicit about our focus on racial equity for a number of years until 2017. That was a real inflection and turning point for us. We have always, since day one, worked in communities that don't have the kind of resources or spaces to be just kids where they are. And we have worked in communities that are mostly made up of Black and brown kids who have been overlooked, but we hadn't talked about that publicly. And one of the things that we did is in 2017, we were celebrating our 3,000th play space build. And we were building in the same neighborhood where we built, Aisha and Clendon's neighborhood, not far from where they lived. And we looked around the neighborhood and not much had changed over the 20 plus years since we'd been there. And we thought, my gosh, what is our role? I mean, it's wonderful that kids have this place to play, but how can we use our power, our connections? How can we work alongside communities? How can we ensure that there is change on a greater scale so that we don't look around a neighborhood and see a playground here, a playground there. We see a neighborhood that's thriving, a neighborhood that's changing. How can we be a part of the solution? And so at that moment, we thought we really have got to commit to understanding structural racism and how that fighting against that and trying to rectify the structural racism that has happened in our country for so long, how we can be a part of that solution. And so there's a long paper I'm happy to send folks that talks a little bit about our own internal journey and where we are. In my world, it was clear that as we started to do this work and change how we work, our brand had to change. We had to get very explicit about our role and really define the lack of play spaces as an equity issue. So we had to, like I said, match the scope of what our mission was becoming and what our impact wanted to be in the world. So our strategy was to spark place-based equity. You know, as I mentioned, our values were all about equity, building community, and then the joy that comes along with building a playground. You know, at the end of the day, we want kids to feel like they belong. We want kids to feel like the sense of ownership, the sense of pride. We want to tell them that they matter. And a play space and the community coming together to build a play space is one solution amongst many that can really launch positive change and unlock even more change and more growth in neighborhoods all over the country. So we leaned into and are taking full ownership of fighting for place-based equity. This is our cause. And this is where we have a lot of experience and understand, again, how this issue can tie into a much larger fight for the right to belong in public space. But what we mean by place-based equity, and we're at this moment now where we're getting to define it. And what we mean by place-based equity is the access and quality. So it's not just about having a play space nearby or being able to enjoy one easily. It's also about having a really great play space, right? A play space that has the latest killer playground equipment that much better resources communities always seem to have, right? So we want to make sure that kids have both access and the quality. So we landed on our mission statement that we amplify the power of communities to build the play spaces that spark unlimited opportunities for every kid everywhere. Our mission and play space and equity for good. And the behind the scenes I'll tell you all about this is that we wanted to, you know, our big challenges are around balancing the joy and the end result, the vision for the future that we have with today's reality. And that we are dealing with some serious challenging issues. And yes, a playground is not going to solve all problems, but it certainly, again, can be a part of an overall solution. So this is something that the rallying cry is something that we use internally. And what's interesting about this is that you'll see the seeds of this as I get into the pivots that we've had to make in light of today. So this rallying cry, these materials were written back in the fall when we were all together. And, you know, at the time we were really pushing the envelope on our brand and being incredibly bold. I mean, KaBOOM was known as this happy, joyful, sunshine and balloons kind of brand. And our task was really to get bolder and grow up a little bit and say, you know, there are serious challenges in this world and we need to address them and we need to do it together. And this is something that is urgent and worth fighting for. And so you'll see the language here, you know, that play is a fundamental human right. It's about forging unbreakable bonds. It's the right thing to do, the only thing we do. What you won't see in here is that we talk a little bit about affecting communities of color, but we don't name racism in here. And so this is, you know, I think if we wrote the rallying cry today, it would be even stronger, which is really interesting. I'll get to that in a minute. So we did all this work over 2019, pulling that rallying cry together, pulling that the mission together, changing our brand, our look and feel, leaning into the boldness, leaning into place-based equity as a cause. We got so excited and launched our brand on February 27th. And note that date. That was just a couple weeks before the world shut down for COVID. So then we found ourselves in the place of saying, we could not believe this, everybody. We said, okay, yeah, kids should actually not be on playgrounds right now. that's a terrible idea. They're incredibly important, but they are not real great places to gather during COVID-19. So they're still critical and we need to focus on them, but please stay away. The opportunity that we had though, that we really took advantage of, and what this piece says, if you check it out on our website, is, you know, all of a sudden we had a lot of people, parents, people who have kids in their lives, who realize the importance of a space to play, the importance of kids actually needing to go out. I mean, anybody, like you can imagine yourself as a kid. We were all kids once, cooped up in the house and without a place to go play, and how detrimental that would be to childhood. So we did talk about, you know, it gave us the opportunity to talk about the importance of play spaces. And I think here's one of the connection points to what Sydnye was talking about. You know, in the same way that the Special Olympics is a wonderful healthcare provider and healthcare organization and can help fight for health disparities or fight against health disparities, KaBOOM is in the same kind of position where we know that when communities can open back up again, when people can gather again, because we will get back out, this is a real time to get busy and make sure that kids have the spaces to go once the world opens up again. We started to see that there were some communities that were opening across the country, and some health department officials that were deeming it safe for kids to go play. We left it to the officials to do that. But we were hearing from our community partners and others saying, you know, what do we do? I mean, we're allowed to be open, but we're not sure how to open or what we should do. And then we also had really, you know, again, this was another equity point. We had big concerns that communities that are well-resourced could open up much more easily, right? They could keep the hand sanitizer stations stocked. They probably could afford to hire staff people to help with distancing and that sort of thing. So what could we do to help drive awareness to this issue and make sure that in the jurisdictions where playgrounds were opening, kids had a safer place to play? This is also a big thought leadership play for us, because we pulled in, we worked with the CDC, we worked with public health experts, we worked with play space experts, designers, to comment and help create and inform the guidelines so that we would be able to give communities exactly what they needed and have the best experts provide the thinking around the public health issues that, of course, we as KaBOOM are not experts in. So this guidance is still available today. And as we're seeing places open and close, it's still being used. So then George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor was murdered, and our country began talking again about racial equity, and how race equity was really the pandemic, the 400-year-old pandemic that, you know, we've been fighting for a long time, really became more central to our work and to our mission than COVID even is. You know, COVID's going to be temporary. Pandemics are going to come and go, but this race equity piece is here to stay, and we have got to make changes. And so, you know, again, this allowed us to really, you know, I was really grateful, honestly, as a marketing and brand leader in my organization, that we had already done the brand evolution work, because this moment and doing that work allowed us to really lean into what's happening now and get even stronger. And the reason I put the rallying cry in earlier in the slide is that you can see how the seeds of that really get to some of the messaging and language we use here, and how we are leaning in even stronger to our focus on racial disparities and ending them, and what we need to do to make sure that kids, especially Black kids, brown kids, kids growing up in communities where there's been disinvestment because of their race, where we can do some work and be a part of the solution to rectify that. And so the language gets even stronger here. And I know that internally we're really proud of this and proud of being able to lean into this, and are, again, so grateful that we've been doing the work and will continue to do the work so that we can do that. And if you look at our website, you'll see we're continuing to use language like this and start to name disparities much more specifically. One of my colleagues wrote a really beautiful blog post in response to the situation that happened in Central Park in the spring when Amy Cooper called the police on Christian Cooper, who was just trying to do bird watching and do it safely without being interrupted by her dog. And so it was just a wonderful piece about, how Christian Cooper he was a little Black boy, and once he was probably, imagining what life could be like and just trying to follow a passion of his, and how we need to make sure that other kids, other grown-ups, other families can follow that same sort of passion. So we're really leaning into that brand message that we created back in the fall, and are feeling even stronger, and that urgency is still there, but feeling even stronger and more committed to partnering with other folks and like-minded organizations to do this work and do it well. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm excited to take questions and keep the conversation going in whatever direction you all want to take it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you guys both so much for sharing. And I think now would be a great time to move into the Q&A portion. Starting off, we do have a question for Sydnye from Jackie Bars, I believe. How were the videos produced? Did you send equipment to the athletes, or did they film themselves using their own equipment and then edit internally? And yeah, I actually had a very similar question when I heard you speaking about that. I'd love to hear about how logistically you guys pulled that off, because when we're working with people who don't do video production, it can be tricky to make sure they frame themselves correctly, that the lighting is okay, that the sound is okay, and all those different considerations. So how did your team approach that, Sydnye?
Sure. Well, we were fortunate in that we couldn't really use sound because we weren't going to be able to clear everybody's music. So we had the athletes and everybody else record themselves with their phone. We sent out guidelines on how to shoot video with your phone, such as holding it steady, having somebody else hold it, holding it horizontally. And then in terms of that's for our athletes. And then our social media team, my colleague, Sally Cohen, she was able to, we got so many in, I couldn't share them in one video. Our editor, I think maybe he did a minute-long invitation video for people, but we had so many that we just chose the ones that looked the best and kind of had a sampling of representation from different regions in the world. And then Sally was able to choose from those as well. And I think she was able to use a lot more because she used a lot of them singly and was able to post them like, join Maria from Costa Rica on, and the rest of our athletes on International Day of Dance, And she was able to, sprinkle them beforehand and during an International Day of Dance as well. So we really were able to get a lot of good user-generated content in that way, but it was just with the cell phones. And then when we did our compilation video, we just picked a song, a cleared song, and people weren't always on the beat with that song, but I think that the spirit really came through.
You can edit that in post.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at the next question that just came in for Amy at KaBOOM. And the question is, does KaBOOM ever get pushback about the company's name given today's violent nature? So very curious to hear your thoughts on that, Amy. I know previous to GreenBuzz Agency, I was with the Washington Wizards and was with them not too long after they made that transition from the Washington Bullets. And those conversations still persisted years later, even after they had the name change. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we did talk about that as a part of the brand evolution. When as most of you know, when you do brand work, you have to put everything on the table. And we realized that we are leaning into the energy of it and the spark of it. There's enough recognition in the brand name and enough positivity that comes with with Sparks that we weren't as worried about the negative aspects, and really have not gotten any pushback because of that, honestly. And I think that, you know, I think that a lot of the communities that we work alongside are frustrated, and they want to, the spark that they want to see is a positive spark and a spark for change, and a spark for positive change. So we feel like leaning into that is really important for us to do right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we have our third question, which comes from an anonymous attendee, which is a follow-up to the first question, Sydney, that you answered. And they're just very curious about how both organizations create content pre and post-pandemic. And so the question is, do you manage and create most of your content in-house, or are you working with outside agencies or partners? And so this question is for both of you. And Sydney, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. It's a great question, and it's a little bit of both. Pre-pandemic, you know, again, we're a really small, unified team of 3 people. So it's impossible for us to do everything in-house. We are a very large organization with different departments who are also free to, you know, sometimes they use us if we have capacity, but they're also free to get help with agencies or however that they feel necessary to get help. And of course, that's also true during the pandemic. But during the pandemic, as a lot of, you know, almost everybody has, we've been relying a lot on Zoom videos, a lot of, you know, question and answer kind of, or like I said before, user generated content. We have, I know one of our groups did have one shoot with one camera person kind of going through some of the safety protocols. So, you know, they only had to show one person at a time, like one person putting up signs at an event, telling everyone they need to wear a mask or wash their hands. And then even some of the content, we do a lot of content where we use previously shot content earlier in the year or even from previous years. And so we might edit those together in-house, but sometimes again, because we're so small, we might have to get help, you know, like a freelance editor or someone to work with us and able to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and we're similar. The way we work, we do a lot of, especially our writing in-house, and particularly lately, as we've been, again, leaning into the connection between racial equity and place-based equity, it feels really important for us to keep that writing in-house. We, of course, worked with an external agency to evolve our brand and worked with a great brand agency on that. And we also use consultants and agencies in some of the same ways that Sydney outlined, where if we need help with editing or video production, or, you know, something that is on the creative services side, especially much more complex in terms of graphic design and imagery, then we will go outside. But, you know, our budget is tight like others. And so particularly in this time during COVID, where fundraising is not as easy as it has been for us in the past. Not that fundraising is ever easy. I can hear my colleagues yelling at me right now, but it's just not, you know, it's a different time right now. And so we're trying to be really judicious with our resources and get very scrappy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to in this time. And actually, another question from Len for you, Amy, was, has KaBOOM ever used focus groups or other direct querying to probe experiences, perceptions, and attitudes about the issues and efforts it's engaging in?
Yeah, and we've done it in a real scrappy nonprofit way.
Right.
We have not done official focus groups. That was one of the things, the research budget that I gave up at AARP by moving to KaBOOM was a difficult one. But we do surveys of all the community partners we work with. We have interview conversations with them. They are wonderfully generous about sharing their time with us and sharing their research, their insights with us. We also rely quite a bit on secondary research and literature reviews to help us determine how the work that we do leads to other outcomes, like we talked about health disparities and health equity. And finally, when we did the brand work, we did a discovery phase, an official discovery phase, where we did a lot of deep interviews with funding partners, community partners, what have you.
And Sydnye, kind of switching back, and looking at these last 6 months, is there something you wish you knew kind of going into the pandemic that you now have figured out over these last 6 months that you wish you could tell yourself kind of at the start of all of this?
A couple of things, just probably like everyone else. I ended up doing more editing than I have ever done in the past, which is a good thing in that I have upped my editing skills. But had I known that coming in, I think I maybe would have been more prepared, so I wouldn't have had to do that, that last month of having to go to YouTube to figure out how to do what I wanted to do. I mean, as a producer, you have all these lofty ideas, but it hasn't been my responsibility to make them come into fruition. So having to learn all that, I do feel like I lost some good time in doing that, and also probably would have come home with my monitor and my keyboard and a little bit more equipment that would have made that process easier.
In terms of what do you guys, this is a question for both of you, what do you think is the biggest adaptation that you've undergone as organizations since COVID-19 hit? Like, how are you guys differentiating yourself now that you both can't do as much in person as your nonprofits are used to? And why don't we start with you, Sydnye?
I think, as I tried to get across in the presentation, the organization from the top down really made a concerted effort to make our resources available digitally. So that was a lot of work in addition to the normal stuff that we do for the communications team. It was a lot more work. We have, in addition to supporting the athletes, we have, for example, World Games, our World Winter Games coming up in Russia in 2022. We had an big announcement around that. With the education program that I spoke about earlier, the UAE has donated millions of dollars to help spread that program globally, and we had a big announcement around that. So we had to learn how to make big announcements virtually rather than in person, which, that is always, all of that is going to somehow come through communications team, the content team, to make sure that the word, and working again, all of the rest of our teams are working really hard to come up with the protocols and the information that everyone needs to continue in the best way that they can. But it's definitely looking at things differently. It's taken creativity across the board to figure out how to do that in the best way possible. If there is an upside, I think the good news is a lot of the content and the stories that we're able to put together people are sitting at home and they're looking for stuff. Networks, magazines are looking for content because they also can't get out and shoot stuff or go out and interview people. So we've gotten a lot of good traction, particularly in the sports world, where places like ESPN they didn't have until recently with the NBA, and still there's a lack of live coverage. We have a lot of great stories for people who are looking for stories, and ESPN is our broadcast partner, so they have access to a lot of good content that goes back over the years that they've been able to share in conjunction with the newer stories we've been able to provide them.
Awesome. And Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I think for us, what's been really helpful is that we've pivoted our focus to be about what can we still get done. There's a lot that we can still do while we're all at home. One of the best examples is that we're still building play spaces. We are not doing them with 200 volunteers like we normally do with 200 volunteers in 6 hours. But we're going to make sure kids have the play spaces they need, and the communities are still designing them. They're designing them virtually, and kids are still designing them virtually, which is really exciting. And so, I think for us, what it's forced us to do is do a lot more short-term planning and be a lot more nimble when it comes to our communications and external planning. You can only really look a couple of months out because things are changing so rapidly right now. And I think that's been a really important muscle for us to flex. Instead of planning long-term around some of our major projects and major initiatives, we're planning really short-term and leaning into focusing on what we can do while we are all at home right now.
Absolutely. I think that's all you can do. That's all you can do. Well, I think that is all the time that we have for today's webinar. Everyone who stopped by and joined us, thank you so much. We hope you had fun, learned a couple of things along the way, and also be on the lookout for our next webinar on Thursday, September 24th, featuring Amy Granitstein, EVP and Creative Newsroom Director at Edelman, and Gabriella Mirabelli of MRC Studios. It's going to be a really fun chat about human behavior and trends with a lot of hands-on takeaways. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, please join it. And check out greenbuzzagency.com/blog to see any on-demand recordings of any of our previous episodes if you're interested. And finally, an enormous thank you, Sydnye, Amy, you guys are great. Really had a fun time and appreciate all of your insights and ideas. And we look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.